58 feral hogs shred your livelihood into dust. You throw flashbangs. You scream until your lungs burn. But here is the terrifying truth: they don't even flinch. They look you dead in the eye and resume chewing 3 seconds later. That is not just a nuisance, it is a psychological war. And Thomas is not alone. Look at this map. This is a quiet, devastating invasion sweeping across 35 states. 6 million wild hogs inflicting $1.5 billion in pure economic destruction every single year. It is an unstoppable biological war of attrition against the American farmer. If you want to understand how we fight back against an enemy that feels no fear, hit that subscribe button right now. Let us dive into the untold reality of the American super hog. To understand how we got here, you have to look at what we are actually fighting. Out here in the American heartland, we are no longer dealing with the lazy pink farm pigs from old children's books. We are up against a biological masterpiece of destruction, a creature often called the super hog. This is a deliberate, worst-case genetic collision between highly intelligent domestic swine that escaped captivity and the brutal, resilient Eurasian wild boars imported for hunting decades ago. When those two bloodlines crossed, nature created a tank. They inherited the massive, deep-digging skull and thick winter coat of the wild boar, combined with the extreme intelligence, high birth rates, and massive size of industrial farm pigs. They can weigh 300 pounds, sprint at 30 miles per hour, and clear a 5-foot fence like an Olympic hurdler. Where are you watching this video from? Please tell us your country or city in the comments and let's explore together. Because whether you live in a rural county or a major suburb, this biological invasion is moving faster than anyone predicted. To see this genius in action, you only have to look at Marcus Webb, a 54-year-old landowner who learned the hard way that brute force does not work against these animals. Marcus spent an entire grueling autumn out in the blistering heat and freezing mud, single-handedly installing a heavy-duty $18,000 electric fencing system around his prime acreage. He did everything by the book, using heavy-gauge wire, industrial chargers, and deep-set wooden posts. He thought he finally built an impenetrable fortress. But the very first night the power turned on, a massive sounder arrived. Marcus watched on his high-definition night vision cameras, expecting the first sharp shock to send them running back into the woods. Instead, he watched in absolute horror as his $18,000 investment failed spectacularly. The dominant sows did not run. They stood at the wire, took the high-voltage hits directly to their snouts, squealed in temporary pain, and then immediately began testing different sections of the line. Within 20 minutes, they figured out that if they used their thick, insulated tusks to push the bottom wire into the dirt, they could short out the entire system. They did not just bypass the fence, they dismantled it. This brings us to a groundbreaking 2023 study from Louisiana State University that completely flipped the script on how we understand wild pig behavior. For years, folks thought hogs were just stubborn or numb to pain. But LSU researchers discovered a shocking biological bypass inside the feral hog's brain. When they mapped out the animal's brain chemistry, they found a highly abnormal neural architecture. In a standard mammal, the amygdala, which is the brain's fear and survival center, triggers a powerful flight response when it experiences pain or danger, like a sharp electric shock or a loud explosion. But in a feral hog, the reward processing center, fueled by an insatiable, evolutionary drive for caloric intake, possesses a direct neurological override over the amygdala. In plain English, their desire to eat completely shuts down their ability to feel fear. When a wild hog smells a field of high-calorie corn or sweet sugar cane, the brain floods with dopamine. If they encounter an electric fence or a booming deterrent, their brain does not register it as a deadly hazard to flee from. Instead, the neurological wiring processes the shock as a static data point. To them, the pain is simply a minor tax they have to pay to get to the prize. They view our most expensive deterrents as simple puzzles to be analyzed, adapted to, and ultimately solved. They learn the timing of our patrols, they memorize the layout of our traps, and they turn our own technology against us. To protect the land, American farmers had to stop trying to scare an animal that is biologically incapable of feeling fear. They had to learn to outthink them. There is a unique kind of bitterness that settles in your chest when you stand out in the quiet of the morning, running your hand along a brand new, shiny, galvanized steel fence, knowing it did absolutely nothing to protect you. That was exactly where Marcus Webb found himself. He was looking at thousands of dollars of heavy metal, gleaming under the Texas sun, completely intact except for the ruined, muddy craters directly underneath it. The real gut punch came a few days later when a couple of state wildlife biologists came out to survey the damage. Marcus expected them to recommend a heavier gauge of steel or maybe a taller barrier. Instead, they dropped a truth bomb that nearly knocked him out. They told him that his expensive, beautifully engineered shiny fence was actually helping the hogs destroy his land. It was serving as a giant illuminated roadmap for the entire sounder. When you look at night vision trail cam footage, you can see this psychological nightmare playing out in real time. The pigs were not trying to smash through the heavy steel. Instead, they were walking casually right alongside it, using the bright, reflective metal as a visual guide. It functioned like a funnel, herding the entire sounder directly to the natural dips in the terrain, the softest creek beds, and the loose soil entry points where they could easily dig their way underneath. Have you ever spent hard-earned money trying to fix a problem, only to realize your solution was actually making things worse? Let me know in the comments below, because that kind of frustration will make any property owner want to pull their hair out. Marcus realized that by building a physical fortress, he had accidentally given his enemy a perfect navigational highway. To fix it, Marcus had to completely shift his strategy from heavy engineering to basic animal psychology, specifically focusing on the visual contrast theory. See, a feral hog's eyes do not function like yours or mine. They have terrible depth perception and struggle to identify solid, continuous geometric shapes. Instead, their entire visual processing system relies heavily on high contrast and light breaks. That shiny, silver galvanized steel fence was practically glowing in the dark, casting sharp shadows and creating a massive, distinct line of contrast against the dark background of the woods. To a hog, that stark boundary line screamed that something valuable was being hidden on the other side. So, Marcus decided to use an invisible strategy. Instead of tearing the fence down or buying more expensive equipment, he went to the local hardware store and bought several gallons of cheap, matte black exterior paint. He and his son spent a weekend coating every single inch of that shiny metal until it looked like a shadow. Then, he went along the bottom 2 feet of the fence line and attached a solid, opaque debris barrier made of thick, dark landscaping fabric to eliminate any gaps where light could peek through. By doing this, he completely erased the visual contrast against the dark timber and the native soil. From a distance, the fence effectively vanished into the natural landscape. To the hogs, the bright, enticing border was gone, replaced by a solid wall of darkness that offered no visual cues, no light breaks, and no structural hints to follow. The payoff was immediate and deeply satisfying. This incredibly simple, low-tech modification cost Marcus less than $200 in total materials. Yet, it achieved what an $18,000 high-voltage system could not. The weekly intrusions on his property instantly dropped from a frustrating 4 times a week down to absolute 0. By understanding how the enemy perceived the world, Marcus stopped fighting their physical strength and started exploiting their biological limitations. But keeping them away from the fence was only the first step. The next challenge was figuring out how to handle the massive, hungry sounders still lingering just outside his property lines, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Once you realize you can render your property invisible to a hog's eyes, you quickly run into a much bigger problem. You cannot paint a smell. If you lift an aerial drone up over the sprawling sugarcane fields of the south, you look down at a sea of green stretching for miles. But if you could see the world through a hog's nose, that entire landscape would look like a swirling, vibrant map of glowing neon light. For months, Marcus Webb had been desperately trying to hide the heavy, sweet aroma of his ripening crops. He tried spraying chemical masks, cleaning his equipment obsessively, and changing his walking paths. None of it mattered. The pigs always knew exactly where the food was, and they knew exactly when Marcus left for the night. To understand why Marcus was failing so miserably, you have to look at some incredible research coming out of Australia's chief scientific agency, CSIRO. Their wildlife biologists discovered that feral hogs possess a highly sophisticated, enlarged olfactory bulb that does something way beyond just smelling food, or capable of complex spatio-temporal mapping. What does that mean in plain terms? It means a wild hog doesn't just catch a scent and run toward it. They can analyze the microscopic degradation of a scent plume in the air and calculate time and distance. They can smell a human footprint or a tractor tire and know, down to the exact hour, how long ago that object passed by. They map out the entire landscape by scent and time, turning your daily routine into a predictable schedule they can easily exploit. What about you? Do you have an animal in your neck of the woods that seems to always outsmart your best efforts? Drop a comment below and tell me about it, because dealing with an adversary this smart can make you question your own sanity. When Marcus read that Australian data, he had a massive breakthrough. He realized that trying to mask human odors or crop scents on a working farm was a fool's errand. You cannot fight biology. So instead of trying to hide the scent, he decided to weaponize it. He completely shifted his mindset from concealment to intentional behavioral redirection. If the hogs were going to use their noses to map out his property, Marcus was going to draw a new map for them, one that led straight to a dead end. The execution of this plan was pure genius. Marcus stopped treating his massive corral traps as hidden, passive cages. Instead, he turned them into the grand finale of a highly calculated scent corridor. He went out beyond the perimeter of his primary sugarcane fields and began creating a literal trail of smell. He started miles away from his actual crops, using a highly concentrated, sticky mix of fermented corn, sweet molasses, and diesel fuel, a scent cocktail that hogs find completely irresistible. He didn't just dump it all in one place. He laid down a precise, escalating gradient of odor. The scent started faint at the edge of the woods and grew progressively stronger, heavier, and more enticing as it wound its way through the timber, completely bypassing his vulnerable sugarcane fields. The trail ended deep inside a massive, open corral trap equipped with a cellular drop gate. To the hogs, following this scent corridor was not a trap, it was a logical progression of their own spatial mapping. They chose the path of least resistance and maximum reward. The results of this behavioral redirection were nothing short of miraculous. Marcus recorded 18 consecutive nights of absolute silence and zero crop intrusion in his fields. The entire sounder willingly marched right past the sugarcane, following the scent trail directly into the containment zone. By choosing to direct the animal rather than confront it, Marcus proved that a landowner's greatest asset is not a weapon, but an understanding of the wild. Guiding an entire sounder into a trap using their own sense of smell is a massive victory, but any seasoned landowner will tell you that the victory is short-lived if it burns you out completely. For the longest time, Marcus Webb was running himself into the ground. He was pulling grueling all-night shifts, sitting in a freezing deer stand, or walking the perimeter with thermal scopes at 2 in the morning, trying to catch the hogs in the act. He was completely exhausted, irritable, and running on pure caffeine, while the hogs always seemed to be one step ahead. It felt like a never-ending game of cat and mouse where the mouse was winning. Have you ever worked yourself to the bone trying to solve a problem on your property, sacrificing your sleep and sanity, only to feel like you are spinning your wheels? Drop a comment below and let me know your stories about battling burnout, because out here, that exhaustion is very real. Marcus finally caught a break when he stumbled across a fascinating piece of wildlife research from Auburn University. The researchers were studying the impact of hunting pressure on wild pig behavior, and what they found completely changed how Marcus managed his time. The data proved that feral hogs have a deeply hardwired circadian rhythm that is hard-coded right into their biology at the hormonal level, driven by intense spikes in cortisol and melatonin. When humans start hunting them heavily, shooting at them, or chasing them with dogs, the pigs do not leave the area, and they do not change their destination. Instead, their bodies simply adapt by shifting their entire activity cycle into razor-sharp, highly predictable nocturnal windows. They turn into ghosts that only operate when they know the woods are entirely dark and quiet. This biological clock was not a sign of random chaos. It was a rigid, clockwork schedule. Marcus realized that by patrolling the land at random hours, he was just stressing himself out while tipping off the hogs to his presence. He needed to work smarter, not harder. So, he made the executive decision to stop the exhausting midnight patrols completely. He hung up his boots at sundown, climbed into bed, and let technology do the heavy lifting. Marcus took his advanced, cell-connected smart traps and programmed the drop-gate timers to activate exclusively during that peak biological window identified by the Auburn research, typically between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. The visual contrast was beautiful. On one side of a split-screen security monitor, you could see Marcus fast asleep in his warm bed at 2 a.m. On the other side, a massive sounder of 20-plus hogs was casually strolling right into the center of the corral trap, totally relaxed because the human element had disappeared from the woods. 3 seconds later, the automated cellular door dropped shut, securing the entire group at once. By aligning his defense tactics with the biological clock of the enemy, Marcus saw his trapping efficiency spike by a mind-blowing 340%. He was catching more pigs in a single automated drop than he used to catch in a whole month of active, miserable night hunting. But the best part of this precision strike strategy was the psychological reset it provided. The Auburn study noted that when an entire sounder is cleanly removed in a single event, it creates a massive power vacuum and a temporary behavioral freeze in the surrounding woods. For Marcus, every major capture bought him a peaceful reset window of 7 to 12 days of absolute unbroken quiet on his land. No rooting, no damaged fences, and no midnight alarms. It was proof that when you understand the internal clock of your adversary, you can finally reclaim your own peace of mind. Trapping and outsmarting these creatures brings peace today, but looking at a new litter of striped piglets on a trail cam reminds us of a hard truth. With a 150% annual reproduction rate, you cannot just shoot or trap your way out of this crisis long term. It is a never-ending treadmill. The real future lies in scientific innovations like Gonacon, a USDA-approved vaccine that stops the population boom at its root without the endless cycle of violence. The biggest lesson here extends far beyond the farm. In life, when faced with a massive, destructive force, brute force will only get you so far. The moment we stop fighting with anger and start leading with deep biological understanding, the land wins and we win. What is your biggest takeaway from Marcus and Rosa's journey? Drop a comment below, hit that subscribe button to join our community, and support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Midnight, in rural Texas. You're sitting on your porch, and the silence is shattered by a sound that chills you to the bone, a chaotic chorus of guttural grunts and heavy snapping jaws. In the pitch black, a shadow army of razor-sharp tusks and 600 pounds of pure muscle is tearing your land to shreds. This isn't a scene from a horror flick. This is the reality of the wild hog invasion, a full-blown ecological war unfolding right now across North America. Right now, more than 6 million of these feral beasts are running rampant through at least 35 states and aggressively pushing north into the Canadian prairies. We are talking about Sus scrofa, the wild boar, one of the most destructive, aggressive, and highly adaptable invasive mammals on the face of the planet. They are smart, they are hungry, and they are practically unstoppable. If you want to know how a regular farm animal turned into America's #1 environmental nightmare, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications because this story gets wild. Let's dive into the invasion. To understand how this nightmare got so out of hand, we have to roll back the clock and look at how this country was built. This whole crisis didn't just happen overnight by some freak accident of nature. It started with a series of deliberate choices made by humans who had absolutely no clue they were setting off a biological time bomb. The story actually begins all the way back in the early 1500s, when Spanish explorers like Hernando de Soto first stepped foot on the beaches of the New World. They didn't just bring ships, armor, and weapons. They brought livestock. Specifically, they brought domestic pigs. Back then, there were no grocery stores or refrigeration, so these animals were essentially a walking, self-replicating food pantry. The explorers would intentionally release some of these domestic hogs into the wild forests of Florida and Texas so that future expeditions would have an abundant supply of fresh meat waiting for them. These early farm pigs were tough, but they were still just domesticated animals. They learned to survive on their own, turning into what we now call feral hogs, but they still generally stayed within certain limits. They were a nuisance, sure, but they weren't an existential threat to the continent. Not yet, anyway. The real match was thrown into the powder keg a few centuries later, right around the turn of the 20th century. That is, when wealthy American elites and sports hunters decided they wanted a new challenge. They didn't just want to hunt local game anymore. They wanted a true old-world challenge. So, they imported wild Eurasian boars straight from Europe and Russia and placed them into private hunting preserves in places like North Carolina, California, and Texas. These Eurasian boars were completely different beasts compared to regular farm pigs. They were fierce, heavily built, and armed with razor-sharp tusks. But here is the thing about wild animals. They do not like being fenced in. It didn't take long for these imported wild boars to break out of those wealthy hunting estates. And that is exactly where the plot thickens and the story takes a terrifying turn. Once these massive, aggressive Eurasian boars escaped into the deep woods, they ran straight into the wild populations of escaped domestic farm pigs that had been breeding since the days of the Spanish conquistadors. And nature did what nature does. The two groups began to crossbreed. The result of that accidental genetic mashup is what scientists and wildlife biologists now call a superhybrid. This superhybrid is the ultimate biological survival machine. It took the absolute worst traits of both worlds and combined them into a brand new monster. From their domestic ancestors, these hybrids inherited a massive, hyper-prolific reproductive rate. They can pump out huge litters of piglets multiple times a year without skipping a beat. From their wild Eurasian ancestors, they inherited an incredibly thick skull, a relentless aggressive streak, sharp tusks, and a highly advanced level of intelligence. We are talking about a creature that routinely tops out at over 400 pounds, with some massive boars pushing past the 500-pound mark. That is a quarter ton of pure, unstoppable muscle. They are shockingly fast, fiercely protective of their young, and possess a level of cunning that leaves wildlife managers completely baffled. They can learn to avoid traps, they communicate with each other, and they can adapt to almost any environment you throw them into. They are a perfect storm of human carelessness and evolutionary adaptation. Where are you watching this video from? Please tell us your country or city in the comments, and let's explore together. Because whether you live in a bustling metropolis or a quiet rural town, understanding how these super hybrids conquered the American wilderness shows just how quickly the balance of nature can be completely flipped upside down. Now, to really grasp why this crisis is so terrifying, you have to look at the actual biology of these creatures. They are packed with what you could honestly call built-in biological weapons that make them almost completely invincible against anything we throw at them. First off, let's talk about their reproduction, because this is where the math gets absolutely staggering. These super hybrids are built to multiply like nothing else on land. A regular female hog can hit sexual maturity and start breeding when she is just 6 months old. Think about that for a second. They are still practically babies themselves, and they are already pumping out the next generation. And they don't just breed once a year like deer or bears. They can drop multiple litters every single year. Each one of those litters can easily range from 4 to 12 piglets. If the weather is good and there is enough food, a single breeding pair can spark a population explosion that floods an entire county in just a couple of seasons. It is a relentless, non-stop assembly line of new hogs hitting the ground running. But it gets worse. Once those piglets grow up, they have to eat, and that brings us to their absolute zero-merit dietary habits. These things are the definition of a walking garbage disposal. They possess an absolute omnivorous mechanism, meaning if it contains a single calorie and fits inside their jaws, they will swallow it. They will use their rock-hard snouts to plow through the earth, ripping up native plant roots and destroying agricultural fields. But they don't stop at plants. They will actively hunt and eat small mammals, lizards, frogs, and snakes. They will track down the nesting grounds of ground-nesting birds, rare sea turtles, and local wildlife, ruthlessly devouring the eggs and the hatchlings. They are basically vacuuming up the entire bottom of the food chain, leaving absolutely nothing behind for the native species that actually belong here. On top of their insane diet, these hogs are built like tanks when it comes to dealing with the elements. They possess a level of weather resistance that is just downright unnatural. For a long time, wildlife experts thought the freezing northern winters would act as a natural barrier to keep them from spreading. They assumed the deep snow and sub-zero temperatures of the northern states and Canada would wipe them out. But they were dead wrong. These hogs just adapted. In the freezing northern prairies of Canada, they learned to tunnel deep under the snow, creating insulated snow caves where they can stay warm and cozy even when it is 40 below zero outside. Flip to the other side of the map, and they are thriving in the scorching, bone-dry deserts of America's southern border, finding water where nothing else can. Mud, snow, swamps, or mountains, it literally does not matter. They can handle it all. And here is the final piece of the puzzle that makes this a total ecological disaster. They have absolutely no natural enemies left to keep them in check. In a balanced ecosystem, a massive predator would step in to control a population like this. But out here in North America, our large apex predators like gray wolves, mountain lions, and grizzly bears have been pushed out of most of their historical ranges due to human development. The few predators that are left are scattered too thin to make even a tiny dent in a population of over 6 million wild hogs. A fully grown, 400-pound boar is a walking tank armed with razor-sharp weapons, and a regular coyote or bobcat isn't going to look at that and think it's a meal. They will stay far away. With zero natural predators to hunt them down, a flawless resistance to extreme weather, an appetite that consumes everything in sight, and a breeding cycle that works around the clock, these creatures are completely rewriting the rules of the American wilderness, and the native ecosystem is paying a devastating price. When you look at the sheer scale of this invasion, it becomes clear that we are not just dealing with an annoying wildlife issue. This is a multi-layered onslaught, hitting us from 3 completely different angles all at once. tearing apart our economy, fracturing our natural environment, and putting our very health at risk. First, let's look at the staggering economic toll, because the numbers are flat-out mind-boggling. Every single year, these feral hogs drain between $1.5 billion and $2.5 billion directly out of the United States economy, and the vast majority of that heavy blow is absorbed by American farmers and ranchers. Imagine waking up as a farmer, looking out over a multi-million-dollar field of corn, wheat, or peanuts that you have spent months pouring your blood, sweat, and savings into, only to find it looking like a war zone. A single sounder of these hogs can move into a field overnight and plow up acres of valuable crops, chewing through the plants and trampling whatever they don't eat. But they don't stop at the crops. Their massive bodies and constant digging destroy critical agricultural infrastructure. They smash through fences, collapse expensive irrigation lines, dig giant hazardous craters that break tractor axles, and ruin managed pastures. It is a financial hemorrhage that keeps growing every single year, driving up production costs and ultimately threatening the food supply chains that everyone relies on. But the financial bleeding is only one side of the coin. If you step away from the farmland and look into the deep woods and local waterways, you will see a total environmental catastrophe unfolding. The culprit behind this ecological ruin is a behavior known as rooting. These animals use their rock-hard snouts and powerful neck muscles like living bulldozers, relentlessly flipping over the topsoil to hunt for food. This constant churning strips away the ground vegetation, leaving the bare earth completely vulnerable to massive wind and rain erosion. When the heavy rains come, all that loose, ruined soil washes straight into local creeks, rivers, and streams, choking out aquatic life with thick silt. And speaking of water, their bathroom habits are causing a massive public safety crisis. These hogs love to wallow in shallow water and mud to cool down because they cannot sweat. While they are hanging out in these water sources, they leave behind massive amounts of waste. Wildlife biologists testing these affected waters have discovered that feral hog activity can cause toxic bacterial levels, specifically dangerous strains like E. coli, to skyrocket to over 40 times the normal safe limit. This concentrated pollution poisons the drinking water for native wildlife, completely destroys fragile aquatic ecosystems, and ruins downstream water supplies that local communities rely on for recreation and daily use. That brings us to the third and perhaps most terrifying angle of this crisis, which is the direct threat to human and animal health. These creatures are not just clean, wild animals living in the woods. They are literal walking biohazards, functioning as highly active mobile reservoirs for a horrifying laundry list of dangerous diseases. Scientists have confirmed that wild hogs carry between 30 and 34 different virulent pathogens and parasites. We are talking about highly contagious and destructive illnesses like brucellosis, E. coli, and the devastating African swine fever. The real danger here is the cross-contamination factor. Because these hogs are constantly breaking into commercial farming operations to steal food or interact with domestic animals, they can easily pass these deadly pathogens directly to our livestock. If a disease like African swine fever managed to break into the main commercial pork industry in America, it could trigger a total shutdown of international trade, force the culling of millions of farm animals, and cause the immediate collapse of a multi-billion-dollar domestic industry. And it is not just a threat to livestock. Diseases like brucellosis can easily cross over the species barrier to infect humans, causing severe, chronic flu-like symptoms, organ damage, and long-term health complications for hunters, farmers, or anyone who accidentally comes into contact with contaminated meat or water. When you combine billions of dollars in yearly agricultural destruction, the systematic poisoning and erosion of our natural water systems, and a rolling biological threat capable of sparking a massive agricultural or human health pandemic, it becomes painfully obvious that the wild hog crisis is one of the most dangerous, multifaceted threats facing North America today. So, With a multi-billion-dollar crisis on our hands, the big question is, how do we stop them? For a long time, the go-to answer for most people was simple. Grab a rifle, head out into the woods, and start shooting. It sounds like the perfect setup for weekend recreational hunting. And on paper, you would think that millions of eager hunters out there would easily make a dent in the hog population. But in reality, traditional sport hunting has turned out to be a complete and total failure. In fact, it has actually made the entire problem a whole lot worse. Here is why. Wild hogs are incredibly intelligent animals. When a group of hunters goes out and shoots just 2 or 3 hogs out of a larger family group, which is called a sounder, they are essentially educating the survivors. The remaining hogs immediately learn the sounds of trucks, human scent, and gunfire. They become hyper-aware, change their behavior overnight, and go completely nocturnal, doing all their damage under the cover of pitch-black darkness. Even worse, the scattered survivors will fracture into smaller groups and scatter into brand new territories where they have never been seen before, spreading the invasion even further. And there is a darker side to the sport hunting culture too. Because wild hog hunting became such a popular, lucrative hobby, some rogue hunters and crooked outfitters started intentionally capturing these hogs, transporting them across state lines, and illegally releasing them into pristine forests, just so they would have something new to hunt the following weekend. Instead of helping control the problem, human recreational habits ended up fueling the fire. Realizing that traditional hunting was failing miserably, wildlife biologists and state authorities had to completely change their playbook and shift to high-tech, strategic solutions. The gold standard right now, the absolute core strategy that actually works, is a method called whole sounder trapping. Instead of targeting individual hogs, this method aims to eliminate the entire family unit at the exact same time, so there are 0 survivors left to reproduce or learn from the experience. This isn't your grandfather's old box trap either. We are talking about massive, high-tech corral traps that utilize cellular networks, live streaming video feeds, and infrared thermal cameras. Wildlife managers will set up these giant circular pens in areas with high hog activity and bait them with corn for days or even weeks. They wait patiently until the live video feed on their smartphones shows that every single member of that hog family, from the massive matriarch sow down to the tiniest piglet, is comfortably inside the enclosure eating. Then, with a single tap on a phone screen from miles away, the operator drops the heavy gate remotely. Just like that, the entire lineage is captured at once, completely cutting off their ability to breed or adapt. When the terrain is too wide open for trapping, like the massive flat expanses of western Texas or the northern plains, authorities bring out the heavy artillery, which is aerial gunning from helicopters. Specialized teams fly low over the landscape using thermal imaging to spot massive herds from the sky. This allows them to sweep through and eliminate large numbers of hogs in a matter of minutes, covering ground that would take ground crews months to navigate. It is highly effective for rapid population reduction, but it comes with a massive catch. It is incredibly expensive to charter helicopters, maintain aircraft, and pay for specialized fuel and professional marksmen, making it a tough option to sustain on a tight state budget. That brings us to the cutting edge of this ecological war, the holy grail that scientists are working on right now, which is biochemical control. For years, researchers have been looking for an effective, humane, and safe toxicant to handle this crisis on a massive scale, and they are currently running extensive field trials on a compound called sodium nitrite. If that name sounds familiar, it is because it is a common preservative used in low doses in everyday foods like bacon and hot dogs. Humans and most domestic animals can process it just fine in small amounts. But hogs have a unique flaw in their biology. They lack a specific enzyme needed to break down sodium nitrite safely. When a wild hog eats a specially formulated bait loaded with this compound, it triggers a condition that rapidly reduces the ability of their red blood cells to carry oxygen throughout their body. The hog essentially falls asleep and passes away peacefully within a matter of hours. The biggest hurdle right now is designing highly advanced, hog-specific bait dispensers that can only be opened by the immense physical strength and snouts of a wild hog, ensuring that native wildlife like deer, raccoons, or bears cannot access the poison. It is a high-stakes game of trial and error, but mastering these modern tools is our only real shot at turning the tide against this unstoppable invasion. Here is the math we cannot ignore. We have to eliminate 70% of these wild hogs every single year just to keep their numbers from growing. But looking at this crisis, the biggest takeaway isn't about the animals. It is a powerful reminder that whenever we try to bend nature to our own selfish desires, it always finds a way to break back. This isn't just a battle for farmers anymore. Winning this ecological war requires all of us, the government, scientists, and everyday people looking out for each other and reporting every single track. When we stop acting like individuals and start working as a tight-knit community, we can truly heal the land we call home. What do you think is the best way to handle this crazy invasion? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button to join our community and support the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I will see you guys in the next video. America. This is not the country lifestyle you used to know. Deep in the heart of our timber and pristine pastures, a biological time bomb is ticking. It all started back in the 1500s when Spanish explorer Hernando de Soto brought domestic swine to our shores as livestock. Fast forward to the early 1900s, and wealthy hunters introduced the aggressive Eurasian wild boar for sport. No one predicted what happened next. These two species crossbred, creating a highly intelligent, razor-fanged super invader. In 1982, they were contained to just 17 southern states. Today, they have invaded over 35 states, marching straight toward the Canadian border. With females breeding at just 6 months old and doubling their numbers every few months, our homeland is under siege. This is a war for our heritage, our farms, and our future. If you care about protecting the American landscape and uncovering the truth about our greatest ecological threats, hit that subscribe button right now and join our community. I am your host, Wayne Miller, and this is the untold story of the wild hog invasion. The damage isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet or some distant problem you can look past. If you talk to any farmer in Georgia, Texas, or the Carolinas, they will tell you that this is an everyday nightmare unfolding right outside their bedroom windows. Feral hogs are built like tanks, and they treat the American heartland like a personal demolition derby. The primary weapon of this super invader is its snout. These animals practice a behavior known as rooting, where they use their incredibly dense, muscular snouts and razor-sharp tusks to bulldoze the earth. They don't just eat the crops, they systematically destroy the very structure of the soil. They dig feet into the ground to rip out the root systems of America's most critical agricultural staples, including corn, soybeans, and peanuts. A field that a family spent months planting and thousands of dollars maintaining can be reduced to a cratered wasteland in a single night. To make matters worse, these beasts possess an uncanny ability to wreck farm infrastructure. A standard barbed wire fence, meant to keep cattle in, is absolutely no match for a 300-pound boar with a bad attitude. They slam their bodies through boundary lines, leaving gaping holes that allow livestock to escape and predators to enter. Once they break into a field, they don't stop at the crops. They target the lifeblood of modern farming, which is the irrigation infrastructure. Hogs will intentionally dig up and trample underground PVC pipes, crush automated sprinkler heads, and rip apart drip irrigation lines just to create mud wallows or find a quick drink. For a family farmer, waking up to a shattered irrigation system during a hot, dry spell is an absolute financial catastrophe. When you scale this destruction up across the entire nation, the economic toll is staggering. The United States Department of Agriculture estimates that feral swine inflict between $1.5 billion and $2.5 billion in damages every single year to the United States economy. That massive figure accounts for lost crop yields, ruined equipment, and the immense cost of constant infrastructure repairs. This is an economic drain that directly impacts the American food supply chain and drives up prices at the grocery store for everyday working families. Before we dig deeper into how these creatures are threatening our native wildlife, where are you watching this video from? Please tell us your country or city in the comments, and let's explore together. The devastation crosses far beyond the borders of commercial farmland and spills directly into America's most fragile ecosystems. A prime example of this ecological crisis can be found on North Island, a remote and vital stretch of coastline in South Carolina. This island serves as a critical nesting ground for loggerhead sea turtles, a species that is already fiercely protected and facing a steep uphill battle for survival. Every year, these magnificent sea turtles drag themselves up onto the sandy beaches to lay their eggs, burying them deep in the dunes to protect the next generation. Unfortunately, the keen sense of smell possessed by feral hogs has turned these pristine nesting beaches into an easy buffet line. Wild hogs can detect the scent of a buried turtle nest from great distances. Once they locate a spot, they use their powerful hooves and snouts to excavate the nests, crushing and devouring the eggs. In one single devastating nesting season, biologists documented that feral hogs wiped out nearly 90% of all sea turtle nests on North Island. This level of apex predation by an invasive species completely shatters the local marine ecosystem. By destroying almost an entire generation of hatchlings before they even have a chance to touch the ocean, these hogs are single-handedly pushing an endangered American species closer to the brink of extinction. The wake of destruction left by these animals is not just a threat to our wallets and our wildlife, it is a direct assault on American history itself. As these massive populations push deeper into rural areas, they have begun invading sacred grounds. Hogs do not respect boundaries, and they certainly do not respect the dead. Across the American South and Midwest, feral swine are actively rooting through historic rural cemeteries. Many of these are small, family-owned plots dating back to the 1800s, holding the remains of early American pioneers and veterans. The hogs dig up the sod, topple historic headstones, and disturb the grave sites, leaving families devastated by the desecration of their ancestral resting places. Even further back in our collective history, these animals are systematically erasing the physical remnants of the first Americans. Feral hogs frequently target ancient Native American archaeological sites and sacred burial mounds. Because these ancient earthworks often contain rich organic material and unique soil profiles, they attract the hogs like magnets. As the herds plow through these irreplaceable locations, they churn the artifacts, shatter ancient pottery shards, and compromise the integrity of the soil layers that archaeologists use to piece together the past. Once a historical site is rooted by a sounder of wild hogs, that piece of the American heritage is fractured forever, leaving us with missing chapters of a story we can never recover. Beyond the immediate destruction of our crops and heritage, there is a much darker, invisible threat lurking within these herds. Wild hogs are not just physical wrecking balls, they are literal walking biohazards. Biologists refer to them as mobile disease reservoirs, and for good reason. A single feral hog can carry over 30 different viral and bacterial pathogens, along with 37 distinct species of parasites. For anyone raising livestock or living in rural communities, this is a ticking biological time bomb that threatens to cripple American ranching. Consider a disease like swine brucellosis. This highly contagious bacterial infection is a rancher's worst nightmare. When wild hogs mingle with domestic cattle or commercial swine across pasture fences, the disease spreads rapidly. In livestock, brucellosis causes severe reproductive failure, leading to spontaneous abortions in pregnant cows and sows. This directly translates to lost calf crops and devastating financial hits for ranchers who survive on slim annual margins. But it does not stop with animals. Brucellosis is a zoonotic disease, meaning it can jump directly to humans. If a hunter handles a carcass with an open cut on their hand, or if someone consumes undercooked wild game, they can contract this debilitating illness, which causes severe flu-like symptoms, high fevers, and long-term joint pain. Then there is pseudorabies, often called PRV. Despite the name, it is not actual rabies, but it is just as deadly for local wildlife and domestic pets. Wild hogs carry this virus with relative ease, but when it spreads to other mammals, the results are catastrophic. If a loyal hunting dog or a local predator, like a panther or a bear, comes into contact with an infected hog, the virus attacks their central nervous system. It causes extreme, uncontrollable itching, leading animals to literally tear at their own skin until they perish. For ranchers and hunters, watching a prized working dog succumb to pseudorabies is a heartbreaking reality of this wildlife crisis. But the absolute doomsday scenario for American agriculture is African swine fever, known simply as ASF. While ASF is not currently established in the United States, the massive, unchecked population of feral hogs makes the country incredibly vulnerable. This virus is nearly 100% fatal to pigs and spreads like wildfire. If ASF ever finds its way into the wild hog population, containing it would be virtually impossible. From the wilderness, it would inevitably breach the biosecurity walls of commercial hog farms. The moment a single case of African swine fever is confirmed on American soil, our multi-billion-dollar pork export industry would shut down overnight. International markets would immediately ban American pork products to protect their own herds. The economic fallout would bankrupt thousands of multi-generational family farms and trigger a massive crisis throughout the entire United States food supply chain. The biological threat spreads far beyond direct contact, contaminating the very elements that sustain life. Hogs have a natural biological need to cool down because they lack functional sweat glands. To lower their body temperature, they engage in a behavior called wallowing, which means they deliberately seek out creeks, ponds, and freshwater springs to roll around in the mud. As dozens of heavy hogs pack into a small stream, their hooves fiercely tear up the banks, causing massive soil erosion and turning pristine, crystal-clear waters into thick, muddy sloughs. As they wallow, they defecate and urinate directly into the water supply. This introduces massive amounts of dangerous bacteria, specifically E. coli and Salmonella, into critical watersheds. These contaminated streams do not just sit in the woods, they flow directly into public water sources and major agricultural irrigation networks. When contaminated water is pumped out to irrigate neighboring fields of leafy greens, fruits, and vegetables, it creates a massive public health hazard. We have all seen the terrifying news headlines about nationwide recalls on lettuce or spinach due to sudden bacterial outbreaks. In many cases, the hidden culprit behind that poisoned produce is a herd of feral hogs wallowing upstream from an American farm. As these populations swell out of control, the crisis is moving out of the backcountry and directly into the path of everyday commuters. Feral hogs are increasingly moving toward major roadways and expanding suburban neighborhoods. This has led to a terrifying spike in severe motor vehicle accidents. A mature wild boar can easily weigh over 300 pounds, and their bodies are built low to the ground, packed with dense muscle and bone. Hitting a 300-pound hog at 65 miles per hour on a dark, unlit rural highway is the equivalent of striking a solid block of concrete. Unlike deer, which often jump and hit the windshield, A hog low centers a vehicle, completely obliterating the front bumper, deploying airbags, and causing vehicles to lose control, roll over, or veer into oncoming traffic. These collisions result in millions of dollars in property damage and, tragically, take the lives of American drivers every year. With their numbers booming, these animals are also losing their natural fear of humans. Sounders of hogs are now regularly breaching the borders of suburban neighborhoods in states like Florida and Texas. Residents wake up to find their manicured suburban lawns completely plowed under, turning quiet neighborhoods into muddy war zones. Even more concerning is the direct threat to public safety. Feral hogs can be incredibly aggressive, especially a protective mother sow with her piglets or a mature boar cornered in a backyard. They have begun attacking family pets, mauling dogs right in their own yards, and cornering terrified homeowners on their porches. What used to be a remote wildlife management issue has transformed into a pressing public safety crisis, proving that no one is truly safe from the reach of this aggressive invasion. Facing an enemy this smart, adaptive, and destructive means traditional hunting methods just do not cut it anymore. Walking into the woods with a standard rifle might take out 1 or 2 hogs, but it leaves the rest of the herd scattered, hyper-alert, and even harder to catch. To truly get a handle on this crisis, wildlife officials and landowners have had to completely change the game. We are talking about a full-scale, tech-driven war that utilizes everything from high-tech military-grade surveillance to aviation assets. We have had to match the sheer evolutionary brilliance of these animals with cutting-edge American innovation and tactical precision. The most aggressive and visually striking front in this war takes place high above the ground. In vast, wide-open landscapes across states like Texas and Louisiana, ground tracking is a losing battle. The brush is too thick, the territory is too massive, and the hogs move too fast. That is where aerial gunning comes into play. Wildlife management agencies and authorized private contractors deploy low-flying helicopters packed with highly trained marksmen. These shooters are equipped with heavy-caliber, semi-automatic firearms specifically designed to handle large, thick-skinned targets. When a helicopter spots a sounder, which is what we call a cohesive family herd of wild hogs, the pilot maneuvers the aircraft to push the animals into open fields or dried-up marshlands. Once the hogs are out in the open, the marksman goes to work. This method allows teams to eliminate entire herds of 20, 30, or 40 hogs in a matter of minutes. It is fast, highly efficient, and it is honestly the only viable way to rapidly knock down massive population spikes across hundreds of thousands of acres of open ranch land before the animals can retreat back into the safety of the deep timber. But as effective as helicopters are, they cannot fly everywhere, and they cannot hunt 24 hours a day. Furthermore, feral hogs are incredibly intelligent creatures. If a herd survives an aerial attack, they quickly learn to associate the sound of a chopper engine with extreme danger. They will alter their behavior completely, abandoning open fields during daylight hours and becoming entirely nocturnal, hiding under the thickest forest canopy they can find. To counter this psychological shift, technicians have developed revolutionary smart trapping systems that turn the Internet of Things into a weapon for conservation. Traditional corral traps used to rely on a simple mechanical tripwire. A hog would walk into the pen, bump a wire, and the gate would slam shut. The problem is that only the first 1 or 2 hogs would trigger the wire, leaving the remaining 10 or 15 family members standing safely outside. Those remaining hogs would watch their companions get captured, learn exactly what a trap looks like, and pass that knowledge down to their offspring, creating a generation of completely trap-shy animals. Modern smart traps completely eliminate this human error. These massive circular steel structures are integrated with high-definition, live streaming cellular cameras and remote-controlled gate mechanisms. A wildlife technician can sit comfortably in their living room miles away, holding a smartphone, and watch a live video feed of the trap in real time. The technician will watch the hogs enter the trap over the course of hours, patiently waiting as the animals eat the bait. They will not touch that trigger button until every single member of the sounder, especially the cautious older matriarch sow, is securely inside the perimeter. Once the entire herd is accounted for, the operator taps a button on their phone screen, sending a signal via cell towers that instantly drops the heavy steel gate. This ensures a 100% capture rate, leaving 0 survivors behind to learn from the experience. Of course, this advanced cellular setup requires a reliable network connection, which is something you rarely find in the deep, swampy bayous or isolated mountain wilderness where these hogs frequently thrive. For those rugged off-grid locations, engineers developed the brilliant Boar blanket system. This is a massive, heavy-duty drop net system that can be suspended high up in the tree canopy over a heavily baited area. Instead of relying on a cell signal to drop a gate, the Boar blanket utilizes localized radio frequencies or independent automated sensor matrices that trigger the drop only when a specific, sustained weight threshold is met under the net. When the trap fires, the heavy netting falls silently from above, completely enveloping the entire herd simultaneously. The weight and design of the net pin the animals to the ground, preventing them from scattering into the brush and allowing eradication teams to hike in and clean out the area efficiently. Yet, even with helicopters and remote-controlled traps, there are always a few rogue, deeply elusive hogs that manage to evade every single trap we set. These are the survivors, the ghosts of the forest that refuse to step into a corral or show their faces in an open field. To track down these final holdouts, scientists turn the natural social instincts of the hogs against them through a highly sophisticated rule of engagement known as the Judas Pig strategy. The process is a masterpiece of biological tracking. Field agents will use a specialized trap to capture a live, mature feral sow from a local area. Instead of euthanizing her, technicians transport her to a mobile veterinary unit. There, she is safely anesthetized, completely spayed to ensure she can never contribute to the population boom, and fitted with a rugged, heavy-duty GPS tracking collar wrapped in bright, neon-reflective material. Once she recovers from the procedure, she is released right back into the wilderness where she was found. Because feral hogs are intensely social pack animals by nature, a lone hog cannot stand to be isolated for long. As soon as she is back on her feet, this Judas pig will immediately begin using her incredibly sharp sense of smell and hearing to track down any other wild hogs hiding out in the surrounding county. She wants a family, so she will wander through the thickest briars and the deepest swamps until she successfully locates an uncharted, hidden sounder and integrates herself into their ranks. Miles away in an office, Wildlife Services specialists closely monitor the satellite radar data radiating from her collar. They watch her digital breadcrumbs move across the map until the signal settles into a tight, consistent cluster deep in the woods, indicating she has found a new family. Once the coordinates are locked in, a tactical ground team or an aerial gunning crew is dispatched directly to that exact spot. The eradication team moves in and eliminates every single wild hog in that newly discovered herd, but they intentionally spare the life of the collared female. Left alone once again, the confused Judas pig will shake herself off and immediately begin walking the wilderness to find the next hidden group of survivors. She repeats this cycle over and over again, completely unaware that she is a walking beacon of destruction, leading authorities to the very last strongholds of her species, providing the ultimate cleanup weapon in this relentless fight to reclaim the American landscape. This fight proves that looking after the land is a duty we all share. We cannot fix this alone through uncoordinated, rogue hunting. When you shoot blindly and take out just one hog, the rest of the sounder grows smarter, goes completely nocturnal, and evades future traps. True strength lies in working together. By partnering with the USDA APHIS program and using the Squeal on Pigs hotline, we protect our neighbors, our food supply, and our American heritage. If you stand with us to preserve this great landscape, please drop a comment below with your thoughts, hit that subscribe button, and join